Hello, everybody, and welcome to the PHLY Draft Show with Fran Duffy. It's a beautiful Tuesday. We are 16 days away, Fran, from the NFL draft. I know you got a lot of work to do. You're going to have a 7-round mock draft to bang out. You got a final big board. What are you going to do with all this time?
I don't know, but 16 days, it feels like it's
That
16,
sends a
but
shiver
it
down
feels
your
like,
spine?
yeah, but it feels like 7. Like, it feels like it's less time than it actually is. But I'm really excited for draft weekend to get here. I know we've kind of ironed out what our plans are from a coverage standpoint, so that'll be fun. No, I'm really excited.
13 days until baby wolf number 3 is due.
No, yes.
Got some stuff to put together.
Are you is like bag packed? Like, are you like at that stage?
Not, we should be, but we are not yet bag packed. I think it's becoming more important for us to make sure that happens. Yeah.
Oh, very exciting.
All right, what we're going to do today, this is going to be fun. We're going to take, we spent a lot of time on the specific prospects.
Yep.
Now we're going to shift the focus on this episode to the teams. And we want to talk about, because nobody really knows the depths of your disease when it comes to studying the draft. And it goes beyond the players. It goes to the teams, the decision makers. And you have all of this research from the past several years about the tendencies of these teams. And we want to work our way through the first round of the mock of the first round and do sort of it's a semi-mock draft, but it's more about, players who make sense for the tendencies for these teams.
Yeah, I think it is important to say before we get into it that everything that we talk about, yes, I'm going to talk about it like it's going to feel like it's a certainty, right? We're going to talk about it. Cleveland, they love to take underclassmen from Power 5 schools. I always use that as the prime example. Well, it doesn't mean it's 100%, right? And so everything's a trend until it's not. And so it is important to kind of keep that in mind. A lot of these where it's, they do it more than any team. Well, maybe it's 60% of the time,
right,
or 47% of the time. That still means you have to keep the other side of it into account. So, but a lot that we can pull from a lot of these discussions.
And draft is different than free agency, where, like, in theory, everybody can try to pay the most for the same player. So much of the draft is dependent on what happens before you. So the further we work our way down the first round, the more variables there are. And so, it may not be perfect, but I think this is a fun exercise. And if you are someone who is like trying to game out what's going to happen in 16 days, I think this will be a very helpful exercise.
Especially if you're big into like the betting markets around the NFL draft, which has become a bigger thing over the last couple of years. This could be the podcast for you.
All right. I hope you're willing to cover any losses.
I won't, but I'll send them your way.
Zach will do it. He won so much money on Houston
right.
that he's going to be able to cover it for you guys. Okay, let's start at number 1. Tennessee. It's certain. I mean, it's a slightly new regime, but it certainly seems like this is becoming a fait accompli, that it will become Cam Ward number 1, right?
Yeah. Obviously they canceled their meetings with Travis Hunter, Justin Hunter, and with Shedeur Sanders. They canceled the meeting with 2 Colorado Buffaloes last week. Basically, every mock draft has Cam Ward going number 1. We had that film room, the live session here with diehards here in the studio when the Giants signed Russell Wilson, and my immediate reaction was, all right, like, they know that Cam Ward's going number 1. Yeah, I think that's the big thing you kind of learn at this point. Cam Ward number 1. I don't think there's too much to discuss there.
We got a lot of picks to work through, so we can speed through that one. Let's go to number 2 at Cleveland, and you are not so sure. Right now, it seems like all the tea leaves are saying they're going to take Travis Hunter. You're not quite so sure.
Yeah, I mean, really, look, it definitely looks like at this point it is not going to be Shedeur Sanders, that it's going to be either Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter.
Which it should be.
Yeah, right. I think so, yeah. And I think at the end of the day, you look at it and it's like, okay, these are the 2 best prospects in the draft regardless of position. I think when you look at Cleveland and their propensity to the type of prospect they typically take, both guys check a lot of boxes. I just mentioned it at the very top. This is the case I always point to, is Cleveland, when they've had high picks in drafts, it is true juniors, 21 years old, with few red flags, typically from Power 5 schools. You look at Hunter, you look at Carter, both guys are really clean, really young, really productive, really athletic. You're checking all the boxes with those players. Now, a lot of the media swing lately, like this week, has been pointing to, it sounds like it might be Travis Hunter.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what you're hearing. 2 things. One, from what I understand, Cleveland likes to play games with the media. They like the smokescreen game.
Oh.
And he Andrew Berry enjoys it. He has fun with it.
Okay.
The next part of it, And this goes, and again,
Well, let's think about this, because if you've heard that, maybe it means that is a game that he is playing and he actually doesn't enjoy the games, but it's a next level thing where he wants people to think that he enjoys the games, but he actually doesn't enjoy the games.
We're going into Princess Bride territory now. Yes. I think when you're looking at it, that, to me, this is why I try and take in as many of the.
You're sniffing this one out. I like it.
Well, look at the head coach and GM press conferences and it's more the GM press conferences. I try and watch as many of those as possible over the course of the year. Andrew Berry consistently preaches, it's offensive line and defensive line. And then he was asked about it this year at the combine, and it was like, in regards to the Eagles, and he said, the Eagles just won the Super Bowl, the pass rush. And he said, I'm pretty clear in our philosophy. He said this last year after the draft because they took two linemen when many of them projected them to take a corner or a pass catcher. He echoed that again this year. I'm pretty solid with my philosophy. It's going to be offensive line and defensive line. I kind of think it's going to be Abdul Carter. That's
interesting.
My gut. Yeah. I don't think I'm not going to be shocked if it's Travis Hunter, but I kind of think that it might be Abdul Carter.
I like that.
Yeah,
that's good. That's a good sniff.
Yeah. We'll see.
Okay, let's pencil in Abdul Carter here.
We'll pencil in Abdul Carter there at number 2.
Now, before we get to between, if Travis Hunter's on the board, presumably it would be Travis Hunter to the Giants. But I want to ask you about something you tweeted, or actually maybe blue skied the other day, and that is this. It is taken as gospel that if you are a front office in trouble, well, if you draft a young quarterback, that's going to buy you some time, right? Because you're going to get a couple of years. Recent history does not bear that out. It's actually the opposite, right?
No, honestly, it's been for a while that I have felt this way because
this is one of these like accepted bits of NFL wisdom that is actually not true at all.
Yeah, when I posted, a lot of people were confused by like my sentiment there. It was like, oh, like you're not showing every quarterback. I know I'm not showing every quarterback. Yeah, obviously not every quarterback doesn't work out at the top of the draft. If you take a quarterback and it works, that typically goes well. But this was just looking at top quarterbacks that got drafted, and just the top 3, not even like top 5, top 10, just the top 3 picks where you saw head coaches, offensive coordinators, or GMs get fired after year 1.
Year 1.
Caleb Williams, Drake May, Bryce Young, Trevor Lawrence, Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, Mitch Trubisky, Jared Goff, Jameis Winston, Marcus Mariota, Blake Bortles. That's the last decade. And that's not every single quarterback that went in the top 3. That's a pretty good sample, and it's just an example of how it's not just, we have a rookie quarterback. That's going to buy us 3 more years. That logic does not apply.
It actually, if you think about it, it makes sense because when you get a young quarterback, you are not setting up to be patient. You are creating urgency because you're thinking, okay, now we got to, this guy, like the developmental curve for this guy is not going to last forever. And if he's not good enough in year 1, well, we got to find somebody who can get him better. And then 2, you think about you want to make the most of the quarterback on a rookie contract. All of a sudden, you create that urgency. And so, I think if the Giants draft Shedeur Sanders and he has a bad rookie year, all those guys are gone for sure.
No matter what. Exactly right. And even honestly, even if he's solid and they win 6 games, they're probably all gone too. They might win 7 games and probably still be gone. It is far from a sure thing. And now also you look at that list and you're like, it's not a lot of good quarterbacks, or at least guys that had early success. And you say, they had a bunch of change after year 1, and there's something to be said for that too. That they don't have that continuity to help them get the ball rolling there early in their career. All
right, so we stick to Joe Schoen, and what is his track record of embarrassing decisions? What does that tell you about what he might do at number 3? Yeah,
obviously, at this point, it's hard. Are they going to go Shedeur Sanders, or is it going to be whoever's left between Travis Hunter and Abdul Carter? I do think after the signings of Jameis Winston and Russell Wilson, that this is going to be the non-quarterback here in this spot. I don't think that this regime personally is. I know that Zach brought this up on the Eagles show yesterday.
Yeah,
I don't think that this team is in a position if you are Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll, to trade down and pass on one of these guys that's an elite talent. I do think that they're in a spot where, we need somebody that's going to be this blue chip player. This class doesn't have a lot of blue chip players. If this was a new regime, then I would say, they're going to move back. I think that there's more urgency for Daboll and Schoen to say, we got to get the blue chip guy into the building.
Is there, when we get on beyond the top 3, and this is less team specific, but I'm thinking about, because the Giants probably won't move down, but they could potentially. Is there a prospect, you think, after the top 3 guys who would be the one to get a team to be aggressive and jump up a little bit?
You know, I look. You would be if you're trying to jump up to 3. That means you're obviously you're
Three
trying
is
to
tough.
you're trying to get ahead of New England, Jacksonville. If you're jumping up to 3, it's because you're trying to get Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter.
Right.
I mean, you're trying to get one of those 2 players. You know, keep him from falling to New England. Who are the teams that could do that? I mean, you guys covered a couple of those. San Francisco, maybe.
Chicago is the one team
Yeah.
in the top that has real equity because there's most of the draft picks this year. In the first round, everybody has their own pick.
Yep.
And then in the second round, there are only 3 teams in either direction. 3 have an extra pick, 3 don't have a pick in the second round. Chicago, from that Bryce Young move, they have 2 high second round picks. So that is the one where, like, I don't think they want to blow their wad necessarily with this young team on just going all the way up for somebody, but I don't know, maybe Abdul Carter, if he's there at 3, is like, man, this is a guy who could change the shape of our team.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen New Orleans be aggressive with trade ups. They're at 9. I've seen in mock drafts Carolina potentially doing a slight move up to get an Abdul Carter. Those would be a couple other teams, but again,
if it's not Carter or Hunter, you don't think
I don't think so. Yeah, I mean, it might be a situation where you might see
a small one
of a Las Vegas move from 6 to 4 to get ahead of Jacksonville at 5. Like if they love Mason Graham and Tom Brady wants to get his Michigan man in the building, all right, we're going to jump them. So that kind of thing. But outside of that, I don't envision one. No.
Okay, so let's pencil in Travis Hunter to the Giants at 3, and now we get to New England, who's in a tough spot because you do think it's a 2-player draft at the top outside of the quarterbacks, which they don't need, and so they get left out here. What do you think? What do their? I mean, it's not a long track record, but what do you from what you know about them? What do you think they're thinking?
Yeah, looking at the mock drafts right now, I mean, the most popular names, it's Will Campbell. Obviously, Hunter's off the board. Armand Membu. And then who's left would be Mason Graham. So you're talking Will Campbell, Armand Membu, Mason Graham. Most of the key mocks over the last couple of weeks have leaned more towards Membu, the tackle out of Missouri. Still some love for Will Campbell in that spot. I think when you're looking at the Patriots, you're looking at number one, it's a relatively new regime. You're bringing in Mike Vrabel to be the head coach. It sounds like he's got the most juice in the building from an organizational standpoint. Brought in a personnel guy. Elliott Wolf was named like the de facto GM a year ago, right after the draft. And so, who carries the biggest stick in that building? I think that's something certainly interesting to watch. Mike Vrabel, just a couple years ago at Tennessee, they took Peter Skoronski in the top 15. Similar kind of body type to Will Campbell, promptly slid him inside the left guard, but he has shown that he's willing to do that. The Drake May pick was a mystery last year up until draft day, like up until they were on the clock. No one knew for sure that it was going to be Drake May. There was a lot of buzz. They could take J.J. McCarthy. They could trade down. Are they going to take one of these offers? It's important to remember the GM, Elliott Wolf, he comes from Green Bay. It's a traits-based operation there. That they might not be willing to take a gamble on a guy like a Will Campbell. So it's very interesting to see. This is obviously a huge pivot point in the top 10. Where New England decides to go is going to dictate how other selections here are going to go. 30 visits were pretty predictive for them last year. So they have bought in Will Campbell for a visit. So that's why right now, as we sit here on April 8th, I kind of lean more towards it being Will Campbell over Membu, but I don't think I feel like super great about that as we are 2 weeks out.
I do find the problem solving of what do you do after you think you have a young quarterback? How do you build out the roster? Those questions very interesting. So for New England, for Chicago, who we will get to, and I do feel like at 4. You got to help your guy, right? And now there's probably not a pass catcher who was worth it here. Maybe you move down and take a Tyler Warren or a Tet McMillan. But I just think that given the state of their offensive line last year, they got to just take an offensive lineman, right?
I think so. And that's why when you look at, especially when you do look at Campbell, you feel good about that pick just landing in the fairway, because even if he does fail at tackle, I feel really good about his ability to last at guard and be an elite guard. So, I think that might be a way just to, no matter what, like protect Drake May at all costs. And you might do that with Campbell over Membu.
All right, let's move on to Jacksonville at number 5.
Yeah,
I mean, we're shooting darts here, but we have a guy coming in from the Rams and coming in from the Bucs. But I think this is like you're thinking Rams DNA, basically.
I think so.
Right?
Yeah, I think when you're looking at Jacksonville, they bring in their new GM, James Gladstone, who was with the Rams. Honestly, you don't know much about what his role was. We're going to lean on our friend Jordan Rodriguez, who did some excellent reporting over the last couple of years with the Rams and their draft process, was embedded in that draft room, I believe, each of the last 2 drafts, and talked about what Gladstone's role was in the lead up to the draft, where he basically had like almost like a clandestine, like, all right, like, boots on the ground, like late in the process would go out and visit with guys and basically give like thumbs up, thumbs down to Les Snead and the Rams front office on, is this guy worthy of bringing into our building? So it's really very interesting from that standpoint. But again, very little known about what his preferences are, where he might lean. And then when you have Liam Cohen, a new head coach, not only is he a first-time head coach, but a lot of his time has been spent at the college level as a coordinator, right? So it's just, we don't know a ton about what they're looking for, exactly what's a fit. A lot of people have gone towards Mason Graham. He is the runaway favorite in most mock drafts. And I think that does make sense. I would say organizationally, knowing Gladstone coming from the Rams, they would love this to be an offensive pick. I do think that they want this. They want to build up the offense. That's the fastest way to a championship. I think organizationally, that's where they want to go.
I like the idea of when a baseball team fires a player's manager, they swing the other way. You get a hard ass, or vice versa. You got to get a player's manager after you fire a Tony La Russa type. I like the idea that for the Jaguars, after having Trent Baalke run the draft, they're gonna run to take the guy with the shortest arms possible.
Right. I think that's actually really, I hadn't even thought about that. But I think honestly the thing that's interesting about this is a person that Baalke brought in, I think is going to be pivotal in this selection.
Okay.
So he hired last year a former Eagles executive, Tom Campbell, who was the director of player personnel at the University of Michigan under Harbaugh for the previous 3 seasons. Now, so they bring in Campbell. Campbell's been there and he's still there, from what I understand, and still a part of this pre-draft process. Well, who knows Mason Graham better than a guy that helped recruit him, bring him into the building, was in the building there with him for a couple of years. Also, I kind of like the idea of, they just brought in a guy in LA. Gladstone was there when they drafted Braden Fisk, who a similar kind of body type, similar kind of impact level as Mason Graham. So I think that the consensus might be right here, and it might be a Mason Graham selection.
I think this is one where they would be willing to move down as well.
Oh, I think they would love to.
A couple spots if possible.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll give him Mason Graham. We'll go on to number 6, the Las Vegas Raiders, a team that is just trying to shotgun themselves into respectability, right? With Pete Carroll and John Spytek taking over. Another new regime, but some DNA to follow from the places both of them have been. Everybody's sort of thinking, and you said it on the show, I believe, this week, that like you're already penciling in Ashton Jeanty. Why?
Just because of Pete Carroll's comments when he first got hired. To your point, like I think I got the this is the direct quote. This is from Pete Carroll when he got hired. It took us a few years to get to the very top at the last few programs I've been with. We're starting right now, going forward immediately. We don't have some timeline for 5 to 6 years down the road. That's not what we're thinking. We're going to build this thing as quickly as we can. So I hear that, and like even hearing like the urgency in his voice, understanding that he's hired as the oldest coach in NFL history. I don't think that this is going to be some long-term vision. I think that they do want to kind of shotgun themselves to respectability, like you said at the top there. So I take that. Here's the only thing. He's a huge, he loves smoke screens. You remember, especially like the last few years at Seattle, it was like traveling road show. Oh, he loves it. He does that, but then also like traveling road shows, going to the pro days. Like he's taking selfies with Justin Fields, and we're going here and we're doing all this stuff, and everyone thinks, oh, is it going to be that quarterback or this receiver?
What is the point of that?
I think these guys just like it. It's just like, you know what? This is a big circus anyway. Like I might as well have fun with it.
Yeah.
So part of me, Jalen Walker has been mocked to them twice in the last week. Bruce Feldman and Lance Zierlein, 2 guys that are very well plugged in for The Athletic and then for NFL.com. Both mocked them Jalen Walker. Jalen Walker has the makeup and like the competitiveness, like all the off-field stuff that Pete Carroll starves for. That's like a sneaky, like I'm keeping that in the back of my mind. I still think I'm leaning Jeanty. But man, it's interesting. I mean, look, John Spytek, who's the general manager, he comes from Tampa Bay. They were not afraid of taking like analytical outliers when he was there with the Bucs. You're talking, obviously, they drafted a kicker in round 1. They traded up to take a kicker in round 2. They took a 27-year-old run-stuffing nose tackle early in day 3. They took a linebacker at 5 overall. Like, I don't think that he's going to scoff at taking an outstanding running back in the top 10. And Pete Carroll, he has shown the propensity to take running backs high. So I think I feel good about this being Ashton Jeanty, but that Jalen Walker, that's an interesting one that's kind of stuck in the back of my mind.
I have one other one to throw out there.
Okay.
Why wouldn't they take Armand Membu?
Yeah, I mean that's
right. You just put him at right tackle right away.
Yeah, I would agree that Me personally, I would not take Ashton Genty,
Well, of course not.
but I think that that's kind of where their heads are.
Okay. I mean, yeah, listen,
He's a great
Genty's
player.
awesome.
Love him, yes.
But if you take Membu, there's going to be a good running back there available at the top of the second round.
And they have, by the way, like this is an organization that has links to a lot of the top running backs, in this class. So Chip Kelly obviously coached both Ohio State guys.
God, I always forget that Chip.
Yeah, I know.
So stupid.
I know. And they also have a coach on staff who was at North Carolina last year with Omarion Hampton. They've done a ton of work on Caleb Johnson. So they've done a lot of work on these backs, and they know some of them really well. So that's why, like that, I'm leaving the door open to that being a smokescreen.
This is very fun. There is no way we're going to be done in an hour.
No, you saw by the way, you saw the video of John Spytek, the interview he did with, I think it was with Sirius XM. Have you seen this? So it was, I think it was late last week, like after owners meetings. He was doing an interview with Sirius, and he was like, "Yeah, my son." Basically said, like, we have to take Ashton Genty. It was very open. It was like, yeah, my son said we have to take Ashton Genty, or he's leaving the family and he's going somewhere. We have to take Ashton Genty. I thought that was very interesting. I'm like, man, like you're either saying you're not afraid
under the bus. It is kind of cool when it's your first draft.
Yeah,
because then you can really play some games.
Yeah. I enjoy that.
Okay, all right. Let's get to the Jets at number 7.
We have no shot at getting this done in an hour.
I mean, we've done 6 picks in 20 minutes. All right, let's get to the Jets at number 7. Another new group.
Yes, I know. Yep.
What do we make of it?
All right. So the names to keep in mind here that most often mocked: Tyler Warren, tight end from Penn State; Mason Graham; Armand Membu; Will Campbell. Those are the 4 names to keep in mind here most often with the New York Jets. Warren has picked up a lot of steam. Our friend Tony Pauline, who's probably obviously follows the Jets very closely. He has said everything I've heard points to the Jets being infatuated with Warren. There's been a lot of buzz with others that have been connected to the Jets in the past as well that point to Tyler Warren. I kind of think that is the pick as we sit here today. Now, that said,
I don't know if I believe it. Well, I'll tell you why in a sec. But go ahead.
Well, look, when I'm looking at Darren Muji, who's the new general manager, he comes from Denver, grew up in that system, was there for years and years. Age matters. So they've taken a lot of young guys over the course of his career when he was at Denver. Small sample sizes. They don't scare them as well. This is a guy that only has 1 real year of production. I look at Tyler Warren and what he represents, like the toughness, the tempo setter, culture setter type of pick. I think that represents what Aaron Glenn is looking to add there. This is a team that was in on Brock Bowers a year ago, was very close to selecting him with their pick. Obviously, they went with Olu Fashanu. It's important to remember, even though like Joe Douglas gets fired, it's not like they fired everybody else on that staff, right? There's a lot of other guys that have been there evaluating this team, know what their needs are. And you say, all right, like we don't have a number 2 pass catcher aside from Garrett Wilson. I think that this could be Warren.
What I am moved a little bit because you think Warren has that sort of culture setting toughness. There are organizations that are, GM focused, organizations that are head coach focused. To me, this is like Aaron Glenn has the juice in that building.
Right?
They're gonna try to set the culture that he wants. His first draft pick. So to me, I'm thinking defense, even though maybe that is not the best thing for their roster. But if you think that Tyler Warren has that sort of toughness that Glenn would covet, and maybe it's because he's a movable chess piece. It's the kind of guy that would give a defensive coordinator fits. That's possible. I could be tucked into it, but I don't know. Is there like a defensive play? Like is a Mykel Williams the kind of player who Aaron Glenn would be like, I can do a lot of things with this guy. He plays with the toughness. We're going to stop the run right away and then go from there. Yeah, I mean,
I think looking at like age and small sample sizes, Mykel Williams would make some sense there. I think when you're looking at, could this be like a Shamar Stewart type of situation? Is that a ceiling there?
You're not setting your culture with the guy who had 1.5 sacks.
I know. But,
right?
In terms of like guys that have traits and have that, and it's especially looking at histories of that defense. Typically, it's like bigger, sturdier, longer edge rushers.
What about Jalen Walker?
I think Walker certainly would fit. I think the body type is a little different, but I think like culturally, like that's the type of player they would love to add. Yes.
Okay. All right. That's good. That's a good one. All right. Let's go to 8. The Carolina Panthers. And this is where you have Jalen Walker maybe earmarked a little bit. Why is that the case?
I mean, far away the most common pick for them at 8 overall. I think Michael Williams is the other one that comes in as at second, but it's far and away Jalen Walker. Michael Williams has been mocked there twice in the last week from the key mocks that I've been tracking, but outside of that, it's been those two guys. Joseph Person, who does a great job covering Carolina down for the Athletic down there in Charlotte. He brought up the idea that it could be an Arbon Menbu, that the Panthers could consider one of the top tackles at 8 overall, but it does feel like that this is going to be a defense draft for Carolina. It's not a new regime, obviously, but you have to remember that they didn't have a first-round pick going into the draft last year, so we don't have a great sample in terms of what they typically look for. I would say that they really harp on versatility, so I would give a leg up, I think, to Jalen Walker. Ejiro Evero, their defensive coordinator, comes from the Vic Fangio school. Could you see a kind of a Zach Bond usage there for Jalen Walker? I think you could. I do think age matters for this front office as well. They took Xavier Liggett with their first pick, was a 23-year-old late bloomer last year, but then they took 4 straight 21-year-olds in that first draft. And so that stood out to me. I went up and I asked Dan Morgan about that at the Combine, and he kind of doubled down on that and was like, yeah, that is important to us and to get those young guys in. So I think that's something.
You were waiting like 11 months to ask that question.
On my flight out to Indy, it was like, all right, like what's one question I could ask? Just going through all of these notes, like one question I could ask each GM off that. So I was able to get a few of them in. But yeah,
what a guy!
I do think that this is an interesting one to keep an eye on for a potential trade back. Just because I think that's
yes. They lost their second-round pick in the Bryce Young deal, but then they got one back. That's a later second-round pick. So they're the kind of team that would want to pick up some equity.
Yeah, and Morgan coming from Seattle, John Schneider, that's kind of the school that he comes from. Is we want to trade back, collect assets. So I definitely think that they could, but if they stick and pick, I do think it's one of the Georgia guys. All consensus kind of points towards Walker, but I'm leaving the door open for Michael Williams.
Okay. How about at 9, New Orleans? GM's been there for a while, forever, and will be there forever. But Kellen Moore gets to have his first draft as head coach. What do you think they're focused on?
Yeah, people are all over the board with the Saints right now. Will Johnson is gaining a lot of steam, the corner from Michigan. He's got 7 overall picks in mock drafts, 3 in the last couple of weeks. But Michael Williams, Shamar Stewart, Tyler Warren, Will Campbell, all getting a lot of steam with this team. So teams analysts are all over the board with this franchise, which typically when you look at years past, like everyone kind of knew, like, all right, in 2024, basically everyone knew they were going to take a tackle. They took Fuaga. 2023, everyone had them taking a defensive tackle. They took Brian Brzee. 2022, their most popular draft choices when I would do this exercise were Chris Olave and Trevor Penning. That's who they end up with, right? So they have been very predictable from that standpoint. The fact that it is this ambiguous, I think it's a little bit telling. We'll see if the C's kind of change a little bit here in the next couple of weeks. But I do think that this is a defensive pick. I know that there's been some thought that maybe this is the sneaky Shedeur Sanders team, and it could be. It certainly could be. Leaving the door open there, but I think it is a defensive pick, and I think that at the end of the day, it's a new coach, but not a new front office, like you mentioned. Mickey Loomis, the general manager, but Jeff Ireland is the guy who's really kind of like the lead, like in terms of the draft. Former GM from Miami, has been with New Orleans over the last few years. The on-field profile, versatile, traitsy, scheme fit at priority positions. Early in the draft, that's what they go for, which makes that you're keeping it on the fairway there. Off the field profile, young, smart, tough, competitive captains. Like that, again, you're talking generalities here, but that's kind of the profile that you're looking for. Round 1, their picks over the last few years under Jeff Ireland, all pass game driven. QB, tackle, D-line, wide receiver, corner. So that maybe eliminates Tyler Warren potentially. High RAS score, like high athletic physical profile. So
Tyler Warren is essentially like Superman Taysom Hill.
Yes.
Right?
Right. Yeah, I think that's right. It's like, oh, you know what? Taysom Hill, we'll just slide him out, and we're getting 10 years younger at that position, 15 years younger at that position. But yeah, high RAS scores early. That might eliminate Will Johnson. Obviously, we don't have a full athletic profile there on the corner from Michigan. What was interesting about it is that while they draft a lot of traitsy guys, it's not a lot of projects. It's been a lot of guys where it's like, okay, like Chris Olave, where tested really well, but he's a really refined player. So it's a very kind of a refined skill set there. I'm leaning Will Johnson. I think Will Johnson from the corner from Michigan might be the pick there.
What would you think about the pairing of Shedeur Sanders and a hypothetical Kellen Moore offense?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think when you look at Kellen Moore and everything's like quick game focus, and we want to get the ball out fast, like I think that fits Shedeur's game. The best case version of Shedeur Sanders. I think that would make some sense.
And I think the dots have been connected of like Kellen Moore and like from the Cowboys family with Dion. Like maybe they're. Dion wouldn't be quite so outspoken against him. I don't know. It's possible.
Yeah, I could say it's a lot of the early reporting around New Orleans. This is from like other people in the media was that it was not going to be a quarterback, and then the Shedeur Sanders stuff started to creep in over the last few weeks. So I don't know if that's smoke or if the early stuff was smoke. Like
Colorado jerseys are very similar color scheme to the Saints jerseys. Got to think about that.
Easy, yeah. We'll see.
Okay. Makes it an easier comparison, one to one,
Yes.
All right. I am fascinated by what the Bears are going to do.
Yep.
How do they build around the young quarterback? What do you think now, Ryan Poles has been gathering assets, right? It seems like it's time to push in a little bit, but I don't know. What do you think?
We talked about this in the past. I still think you need like one more year at least of continuing to build. Most mock drafts of the key mock draft. When I say mock drafts, I mean like you're talking like your notable analysts here. Most mock drafts.
Shots fired at Walter Football.
Yes, I'm not afraid to say that. Yeah, shots fired at Walter Football. Line of scrimmage, O-line, D-line for the most part. Obviously, we've got plenty of Ashton Genty love out there as well. Last couple of weeks since free agency, they've been all over the board in these mock drafts. They have filled a lot of holes. That's opened up more room for an Ashton Genty if he were available there for them in mock drafts. Here's what I would say about Ryan Poles and his background. Traits-based scouting, big, long, and fast. That's something they consistently harp on after they make selections. They have not taken one bad athlete or slow player in 3 years under Ryan Poles. Like not just first round, I'm talking over the course of the entire draft. They don't take guys who don't run well. They don't take guys who are bad athletes. So, and they're fine with small samples. They talk often about how they'll grade the flashes on a player. Position value. Now, this is his opening presser from Ryan Poles. And this is interesting with the Ashton Genty conversation. I found this one as I was going through the notes preparing for this episode. This is from his opening presser. Have to prioritize certain positions because of supply and demand and place them on the board where you can get them. That's what he said when he was first hired.
Yeah, but wasn't his first ever pick in the 3rd round Velus Jones?
It wasn't. I don't think that was the first pick, but I mean, yeah, Velus Jones, but it was a wide receiver with high upside. He was old, but it was a wide receiver.
Return specialist.
Well, I mean,
okay.
if you were dreaming, like that was. I mean, I didn't like Velus Jones, but like when you hear like, all right, this is what the reasoning was. Like I understand what the reasoning is. Now the other big thing there, outside of position value, is no red flag players. So in 3 drafts, have not taken one publicly known red medical flag or red character flag. Now. Armand Membu, I think, makes a lot of sense here.
I also think this is one where the balance of power has swung from Poles to Ben Johnson. Like, I think they're going to draft who Ben Johnson wants them to draft.
I think that Poles has kind of operated that way regardless.
Okay.
I think that he is a general manager who is very willing and open to being able to work with the head coach in that way. And I think that's
good for longevity for the general manager.
Yes, yeah. I agree.
Again, you can point the finger.
It works both ways. Yeah, absolutely. So, Armand Membu, I think, makes a lot of sense. I think the pass rushers, Michael Williams from Georgia and Shamar Stewart from Texas A&M, I think both of them make sense here, highlighting some of these notes that we talked about. Dennis Allen is the new defensive coordinator. What I love about a Dennis Allen defense is that it is very easy to yep, that's a Dennis Allen defensive end. That's a Dennis Allen corner. That's a Dennis Allen middle linebacker. Just because, I feel that way just because I've watched the Saints for a lot of years. And so when I look at Mike Hill, I look at Shamar Stewart, those are the guys, to me, it's like longer, sturdier, powerful defensive
Marcus
ends.
Davenport.
They drafted Peyton Turner, obviously Cam Jordan. A lot of those guys, had that length, that ability to push the pocket. I think those guys would make some sense.
And what about if you were thinking about a Ben Johnson offensive type?
I think that then you're looking at kind of almost like a Jeff Stoutland type of that. Yeah, Membu I think would make a lot of sense. So you're talking about the guys that are available there. I think Will Campbell would make some sense as well, just depending on how they feel about the arm length. That could be, who knows? Like it could be an eliminating factor for them, or it might not be.
Okay, let's talk San Francisco.
Yep.
And San Francisco is interesting to me because I think that they are the kind of team that is thinking about this opportunity like the Eagles did with the Jalen Carter pick, right? Like they don't
Right.
expect that they're ever going to be in this window of contention and have this high of a draft pick.
Yep.
That's why, like, I think if Abdul Carter was, if the Giants were willing to trade down from 3, and the Niners could put a package together, I think they would do something like that. Somebody who can really move the needle for a team that they think is in still a Super Bowl window.
Yep.
But if they stick at 11, is there a player who you think gives them that kind of juice?
Probably not, like that kind of kind of juice. But I mean,
but I think they would also be
players.
like they could be a luxury team.
They could.
You might think it's a little bit like the McCaffrey trade. Like, if they love Tyler Warren, which we have talked about,
Right.
maybe this is the guy you pair with George Kittle, and he eventually replaces him, but it gives the offense and Kyle Shanahan a different dynamic on offense. But I don't know who else do you have here?
I wanted to look real quickly for trades with them. Yeah, they've traded up. So John Lynch has had 8 first-round picks. He has traded up 3 times.
Okay.
He traded obviously for Trey Lance. That was the big trade up. They traded up for Ayuk, and they traded up for Reuben Foster at the end of round 1 in their first draft. And then on day 2, they've traded up 5 times as well on 18 picks. So this is a team that has been willing to make those trades up if the opportunity presents itself. The names most often mocked to them: Armand Membu, I think would make a lot of sense. Kelvin Banks Jr., the left tackle from Texas. Will Johnson, the corner from from Michigan. Jahdae Barron, the corner from Texas. This is the highest you see him in mocks. And then Michael Williams, the pass rusher from Georgia. So lately, Jahdae Barron has gotten a lot of love. He's been mocked there a handful of times. Last week, I forget if it was on this show or on the Eagles show when we were talking through Barron.
Impossible to remember.
Yeah, I forget. Who could tell in today's age? I made the comparison to Rondé Barber.
Okay.
So Bruce Feldman did his mock draft last week, and Bruce Feldman does this mock draft every year where it's all like quotes and nuggets from coaches and from scouts and college level and pro. Like it's got great just like little nuggets. And in that mock draft, said like John Lynch played in Tampa Bay with Rondé Barber, and he made Jahdae Barron the pick. And I was like, oh man, that's outstanding, because it was literally like the day before.
Shout out to Bruce.
It was outstanding. So
Bruce.
now San Francisco, just a couple quick nuggets. Fairly unpredictable team early on in the draft. A couple years now that they didn't have a first-round pick because of the Trey Lance trade, but last year they went completely off the board late in the round with Ricky Pearsall. Athletic profile does not matter early on for John Lynch. Positional value does not matter early on for this team. I would say that overall size, also not really a big thing. The big thing, proven commodities. Older players, long resumes, tough guys, versatile scheme fits on either side. I think that's kind of the profile that they typically look for.
Okay.
Jahdae Barron, I think, makes a lot of sense. Going off of that last
not
nugget.
to your board, but
not for me, but for them, yes.
Okay. Dallas. This is a team we do have a nice long track record on.
Yeah.
The way that they do things. You have seen them mentioned as an Ashton Genty team, even O'Marion Hampton.
Yep.
Could they finally go running back? Could they go wide receiver? Do they want to fortify the offensive line? What do you think for Dallas?
Yeah, I mean, Tetairoa McMillan has been the most often mocked player to them at 12 overall, and lately he has gained a lot of steam there. Even though a lot of mocks have him falling, if he goes high, it's 12 to Dallas. So
stylistically, it makes sense as a pairing with CeeDee Lamb, right?
Yep.
Because he's a big guy who can win on the outside. I could see that.
I could definitely see it. Overall, this has been a team that has been pretty predictable in the draft. Typically, like teams, the positions and players that get mocked to them, you're in the ballpark. The only time they really threw a curveball was when they selected Mozzie Smith a couple years ago out of Michigan. Our friend Jeff Kavanaugh down at DLLS, when he came on my previous podcast a few years ago, he brought up the nugget to me that they love to be first in on a position. So they like to be able to start the run. So when you look at wide receiver, when you look at T-Mac, this would be a spot that would make sense. They're not big into like athletic profiles, like athleticism and speed don't matter with their first round picks. Neither is positional value. Yeah. One of the few teams where and again, it's all small sample, but one thing that shows up every single first round pick, all of them known for like toughness and physicality and violence. Like that's like one big thing. It's like, all right, that's a hallmark of all of their high picks. And they also just trend bigger, like guys that are like on the larger side of the size spectrum. I kind of feel like it might be T-Mac. I feel like Tetairoa McMillan might be the pick.
Tim McManus off the board.
Yeah, right. T-Mac off the board there.
All right, let's go to Miami. 40 minutes in. We'll go a little bit quicker, but
we'll go.
Honestly, not that much quicker.
Yeah, keep me honest here.
What do you think about Miami?
Will Johnson, Malachi Starks, Tyler Booker. Those most often to this team. Johnson has been the one that's been spiking off the corner from Michigan. That's why like there's been a lot of talk about him falling. I just feel like there's been a lot of buzz for New Orleans at 9. We're here talking about Miami here, a couple other teams we've already talked about. Only 1 out of 9 first-rounders under general manager Chris Greer was a senior. All the rest were underclassmen. So I do think that age matters here. I think you're looking for an underclassman more often than not. High-value positions, so we're talking the quarterback, pass rusher, tackle. That does probably eliminate the safety spot. Potentially, if you're looking at Tyler Booker, that would eliminate that. No athlete, or no bad athletes, no slow guys. They have not drafted one player high in the draft with a low athleticism or speed score. So I think that probably does eliminate a Tyler Booker. Mike McDaniel talked about this in Indy, and it's honestly, it's something that has stood out to me since he got hired there. A lot of their early picks were guys that had upside, but were a little bit like raw, unrefined, like not finished product type of players. And so when I look at it, I kind of think that Kelvin Banks Jr., the left tackle from Texas, really makes some sense. Kenneth Grant, the defensive tackle from Michigan, I think makes some sense. Josh Simmons, I think makes some sense. They've been very open to medical red flags. Obviously, they took Tua high. They took Jalen Phillips out of UCLA. Yeah. He had major medical concerns. So would be a team I don't think would be scared away.
Teron Armstead just retired. Maybe that's a good Josh Simmons fit.
I think this is the ceiling for Josh Simmons in this draft. And I think Will Johnson, I think would make a lot of sense. Nick Emanwari, I think this is probably the ceiling for Emanwari. Remember Anthony Weaver, the defensive coordinator from the Dolphins. He comes from Baltimore, where they had Kyle Hamilton and the impact he made in that defense. So I think that all of these guys check a lot of these boxes that I highlighted.
Okay, let's go to Indianapolis, where this is a guy who does have a type.
Yes.
Chris Ballard has been doing this for a while. What is his type?
Trait-based drafting through and through. Height, weight, speed, size, athleticism, speed, all of them matter. High RAS scores. Like if the guy's a freak athlete, Chris Ballard wants him in Indianapolis. Now, production does not matter. Taking guys with just 1 year or very little production over the course of their careers at a higher rate than basically anybody. They bucked that trend last year when they took Laiatu Latu out of UCLA, a very productive pass rusher when he was healthy. But overall, guys that are very, very tradesy, mostly priority positions early. That was an early knock on Chris Ballard. Where he's like, oh, they're taking guys that at low impact positions. That has changed. This is a team that drafts for need. It's 28 out of the 45 mock drafts that I've charted have them going with tight end. And honestly, it's actually, it's 28 out of 45. Most of them have them going that way. Feels like Colston Love is ceiling for Colston.
Okay. And they would love to have Tyler Warren if he fell. You think?
And honestly, like they could also jump up. They were very aggressive trying to move up last to get Bowers and
and if not, you think maybe Emanwari, given the athletic profile, is a guy who makes sense.
I think that Emanwari is the one that if it's not a tight end, if it's not either Warren or Loveland, Emanwari makes a lot of sense.
All right,
Atlanta Campbell would be the other one actually too. By the way, I want to throw that in because they do have
even with Zaire Franklin.
Yeah. Yes, because they lost DJ Speed. They don't really have a proven answer there. I think that could make some sense.
Okay. Atlanta, who had the big shock of the first round last year, nobody saw Michael Penix Jr. coming. What did that tell you?
Well, also, I mean, the year before, Bijan Robinson, there was no real concrete reporting that Bijan was going to end up there when they were selecting that high in the top 10. So, I don't think this is a team. I know talking with, I don't want to speak for you, but with my friend Charles McDonald at Yahoo. I don't know how well you know Charles, but
I like Charles. I would like to be friends with Charles.
Charles is a nice guy. I like Charles.
We've only had like 1 or 2 conversations.
Yeah, I like a Charles McDonald.
I'm a fan of Charles McDonald.
But I
aspire to be his friend.
Oh, okay. So we'll have to let him know. We'll make the introduction. But Charles, I know talking with him last year going into that draft, just like, hey, like, what are you thinking? He said, like, yeah, everyone is saying pass rusher, but like, I don't think you like write that into stone. This is a team that like from the jump, everything is best player available.
They've only ever taken offensive skill players,
right? I think
in the first round.
And I think that when you look at Atlanta, everyone right now, again, it's the same thing. Like everyone's giving them Mike Green and Shamar Stewart and James Pierce and Mykel Williams. Like almost every single mock draft, it's a pass rusher. It might be the case, but it also might not. Like you might say, like, all right, well, there's going to be pass rushers later, whoever the best player available is. So if it's Emanwari, I think he would make a lot of sense. If it's Shahad Campbell, that's another one that I think that could make some sense. no bad athletes, no slow guys. Production does matter. So I don't know that this is a Shamar Stewart team. Ironically, the only guy that they've selected on the first 3 rounds in the last couple of years under Fontenot that had a bad production score was Zach Harrison, who you may remember that was one of my early comps for Shamar Stewart. And they promptly moved him into defensive tackle because he just couldn't cut it on the edge. So I don't know that they would go down that path.
Now, no, it doesn't feel like people are. I know that they have needs on defense, but it doesn't feel like people are talking about the Falcons like they are a team like the Patriots or Bears who needs to help fortify the offense for Michael Penix. I know that they have drafted Drake London and Kyle Pitts and Bijan Robinson, but is the offensive line good enough? Like, couldn't that be a reasonable pick?
Yeah, I mean, I think Caleb McGarry is entering a contract year.
Right.
He's going to be an expiring contract at right tackle. So
how about Gray Zabel, a guy who can give you, wherever we backfill, Gray Zabel can play somewhere.
And I don't have these in my notes, but I know just off the top of my head that they have drafted outside of the Power 5, now Power 4 conferences at one of the higher rates in football. So I don't think that they would be scared to take an FCS player in the top 15.
Okay, how about Arizona? As we really race through this, baby. We are about to be halfway done.
Over under 123 finish time.
Over.
Okay, let's see.
But I think we'll be done before 1:30.
Okay, got it. All right, so we're in the ballpark. All right, 16, Arizona.
Julia, I don't know.
the names here for the Cardinals. Kenneth Grant, most often, but people are all over the board here. Kenneth Grant has 6 votes. Kelvin Banks Jr., 5. Tyler Booker, Josh Simmons, James Pierce Jr. all have 4. So Banks has gotten the most love lately, the left tackle. Everyone has been giving them defensive linemen, but I think people are starting to come around on offensive line for them. Derek Harmon, the defensive tackle from Oregon, also getting some buzz. When you're looking at Monty Ossenfort and Jonathan Gannon, since they've been hired, high-value positions early in the draft, explosive and athletic, a high volume of good athletes, mostly refined players, more guys that are like finished products than pure projects. So I don't know what that means for like a Kenneth Grant. I don't know what that means for a James Pierce Jr. They do really value versatility and multiplicity on both sides of the football, and a huge emphasis on football character. And so that's obviously the stuff that we're not always completely privy to on the outside. They are very willing to move up and down the board. I know you wanted to ask about like potential trade teams. I do think that Monty Ossenfort will be willing to make those moves, but this is a team. Whenever I've done a mock draft, I've gotten to 16, and I've struggled. I don't know if they got good value for what they need. So this could be a situation where they could move up or down going into this pick.
The person who came to mind when you were describing all of those things, who you don't have highlighted here, what about Jahad Campbell?
I brought up Jahad Campbell. I was this close to putting my last mock draft at the Cardinals, and I was on with our PHNX guys, with Bo and with Johnny. And I was like, right now I've got a Pennsylvania, Jahad Campbell. And they both like looked up to the ceiling and were like, Arizona fans will riot if they select another off-ball linebacker.
Yeah, because it's Zayvon Collins, right?
And Hassan Reddick.
Yeah.
Because neither guy worked
a guy
out
who's not who like could be a different position.
Yeah. So it's, honestly, look, it was a different regime, obviously. Steve Kime was the GM for both those selections. But I was like, I'll spare Arizona the angst and I'll go offensive tackle. And I ended up, I think it might have been Simmons maybe, who, by the way, they hired Ohio State's offensive line coach to be their offensive line coach. So there's some inroads there. Not that this is something else I track. Arizona drafts less teams that have like those strong like links on the coaching staff than other teams historically.
Interesting. Okay.
So I don't know that Simmons, the Ohio State thing, is not necessarily like a huge thing. Now, here are the names I've got. I did put Simmons in as one of the possibilities. I do think Kelvin Banks checks a lot of the boxes for this coaching staff. That would probably require Paris Johnson, former first-round pick, to move over to right tackle. Banks is left tackle in his career. And then Derek Harmon, the D tackle from Oregon, is another name and checks boxes.
Got it. All right, let's go to Cincinnati. A team that is trying to really build their roster, stars and scrubs. They're paying like 3 guys, maybe 4, and then they want to fill out the rest. What do you think they might do here?
Yeah, most popular names in the mock drafts: Mike Green, pass rusher from Marshall, another pass
rusher.
That
is such a Bengals pick.
It is from the way that we knew of the Bengals.
Yeah, they're not like that anymore.
They're not. Okay. They don't do this anymore.
They're not Shamar Stewart's team or James Pierce Jr.'s team.
Yeah, no, it's not Vontez Perfect. Different
Taylor
Bengals
Mays.
team. Under Duke Tobin and Zach Taylor, they have not selected one medical red flag or character red flag. They've selected some medical red
flag. What about Jermaine Burton?
He was not someone that that I put in the red character flag.
Okay.
Because the stuff that he had was not that.
Okay.
To me, like a red flag, like the stuff that's out there with Mike Green that he talked about. Like that's a little bit more serious than what we were talking about with Jermaine Burton. Now, that said, when you're looking at what they have done, first of all, people are mocking offensive linemen to them. I've seen tight ends go to mock drafts. I find it extremely hard to believe that they're going to invest in offense. I think this is
Okay.
going to be defense
Right.
all the way. They have got to get that unit turned around. So to me, that eliminates all linemen and tight end here. 4 out of 5 first rounders under Duke Tobin have been third-year juniors. So I do think underclassmen here more likely. Not traits based. Not a lot of high-level athletes for the guys that they pick, like in terms of the athletic profile. But also not a lot of guys that put up big numbers. So like a lot of bad production scores. So like Amarius Mims didn't have a long resume. Jermaine Burton didn't put up big production. McKinley Jackson, not big production. Jordan Battle, Joseph Osai, Drew Sample, all these guys had poor production scores. It feels like that's a Shamar Stewart marker.
Yeah.
Like third-year junior with like length that also has a low production. That would make sense. Then Malachi Starks is one I actually really like that fit as well in the middle of Al Golden's defense. So yeah, I would say Malachi Starks and Shamar Stewart names that stand out most.
Okay, that's interesting. Let's go to Seattle, a team that has an extra second-round pick thanks to the DK Metcalf trade. So maybe they've got some ammunition to move up. Who are some of the players that they might target, knowing that this is Schneider's been there, but this is only Mike McDonald's second draft.
Yeah, everyone's kind of bookmarking offensive line for them. Tyler Booker, the most mocked name. Gray Zabel, second behind them. Yes, thank you. Gray Zabel, second there on the list. Then there's 5 guys with 3 votes. You're seeing receivers, tackle, and Jahad Campbell. So mostly offense here with the Seahawks. McMillan, Tetairoa McMillan is coming in hot. He's gotten a little bit of buzz here late in the last week or so with Seattle, so that would be a name to keep in mind if he were to fall to this point. The thing with John Schneider, he's been there for so long, it is hard to kind of weed out the John Schneider tendency versus the Pete Carroll tendency.
Right.
So that is something certainly that's on my mind. One thing that is prevalent, toughness, competitiveness, like chip on their shoulder. That's something we always hear John Schneider talk about. I mentioned earlier with Pete Carroll, when we talked about the Raiders. This is a huge smokescreen team. 30 visits don't really mean much early on in the draft. I don't think this is a team that telegraphed their intentions that way. Last March, this was interesting. I want to get your thoughts here. It's probably a big discussion overall, but last March, at owners' meetings, John Schneider explained like they draft the highest graded player available, but that grade is influenced by grades and numbers of similar position group club controlled players on the roster. That was, to me, I read that as, we take into account like who's on our roster when we
right. Your weighting need.
Weighting need in the way. Right. So you could say like it's the best player available, but the need on your roster factored that grade.
Right. So in other words, you're setting up the draft board so that come draft day, you don't have to bounce around and think, oh, we need this position, but you are pre-baking that in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it is practical.
Yep.
But probably not ideal long term.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
So the names that I've got earmarked Seattle, I think makes sense. Jahdae Barron, Kelvin Banks Jr., the left tackle from Texas, Josh Simmons from Ohio State, and then Tyler Booker from Arizona. Or from Alabama. I think those players all make sense for Seattle.
Okay. I'm curious to see what they do.
Yes.
I feel much less excited about them with Sam Darnold at quarterback, like most people, I would say, but I'm still curious.
Yeah.
All right, Tampa Bay, Jason Light. Very good track record as a drafter.
Especially lately. Yep.
Especially lately. I think my understanding is the Robert Aguayo was really more ownership driven than Jason Light. Maybe that's retroactive after the spot. But what do we know about the way that Jason Light draft?
Yeah, what's tough about the guy, you would think that the GMs are installed for a long time, and now we're getting to that point where a lot of these guys have pretty deep roots, have a profile. Problem is that when you have a head coach that's been there, or when you have a general manager that's been there for multiple head coaches, typically that profile can morph and evolve and change. And I think that that's the case for when you're looking at Jason Light. Jahad Campbell, the runaway favorite for this pick, like far and away. Like he was drafted in 19 different mock drafts. Second place on that list, there are 4 guys with 3. So basically, everyone, he is the runaway favorite there. Shamar Stewart has gotten a little bit of love the last 2 weeks. I do not think Shamar Stewart is a fit for Tampa the way that they typically draft. The reason why I say that, they've been very big in production. That has been a very prevalent theme with the Tampa Bay Bucks and with Jason Light over the course of his tenure. Typically draft guys, that have upside, but typically it's upside with production. And it's more just like, all right, like you look at what this guy did, he can still get even better. Those are the kind of bets that they typically try and make. You can't be a bad athlete. You can't be a slow guy, especially over the last few years. They've really prioritized the athletic profile, but it's really about like toughness, upside, and production. So here are the names that stand out to me. Jihad Campbell, the linebacker from Alabama. Donovan Ezeraku, I think from Boston College. I think this is his ceiling here at this spot here, the edge rusher from BC. James Pierce Jr., I think, would make some sense out of Tennessee. Maxwell Hairston, the corner from Kentucky. Tetairoa McMillan. This would be another team I think would make some sense there if they wanted to get ahead of Mike Evans.
Right. Yeah. Okay. I'm curious about that.
Yeah.
Denver, Sean Payton, bit of a wild card.
Yep.
Throwing some back on draft weekend. What's he going to do?
Yeah.
Crazy old man.
The names that are most often mocked to them: Colston Loveland, Omarion Hampton, Ashton Genty, but not
quick
really
fixes on offense.
Yeah,
right?
So they just kind of continue to build up around Bo Nix. That's the general consensus. You're starting to see some defensive players lately, but it's mostly offensive playmakers for this team in mock drafts. Now,
you believe that?
I think that something that happens with mock drafts often, this is like over the last, notice this, is you get so like, oh yeah, Denver's going to take a running back or tight end.
Totally.
And then it's like, oh yeah, well, we forgot that. Oh yeah, maybe their left guard is going to be a free agent next year, or their safety is 32 years old, and they want to get ahead of it. So I think we can get into that trap. That said, I do kind of think that it'll be something to build around that offense. You look at what that defense did last year, the steps they made under Vance Joseph. I think that they want to kind of raise the floor, raise the ceiling of this offense a little bit. So that would be my guess.
Do you think there's a wide receiver aside from McMillan who would make sense? Could they be a Luther Burden team? Or an Emeka Egbuka team?
Yeah. I mean, well, let's get into some of that. So you tell me if this is a Luther Burden. This sounds like Luther Burden to you. Because I think that Luther Burden's going to go. I do. Okay. I think he's going to go. So it's a matter of like, which team do I think is going to make this call? Athletic profile matters. High number of good athletes and low number of bad athletes on day 1 and 2. So like both ends of the spectrum, like they are definitely trending more towards good athletes under George Payton and Tom Payton. They've taken just
very confusing.
Different spellings. Yeah, whole deal. They've taken just one 23-year-old on the first two days of the draft. So young players.
Okay.
Versatile players. Both sides of the ball. They value versatility. Burden checks that box. Small samples are okay. Lots of guys with very little starting experience. That's not really the case with Burden. Positional value does not matter. George Payton has taken running backs, guards, tight ends, and off-ball linebackers in the draft. So, although Sean Payton, I think, is more geared to the impact position, that's neither here nor there. Medically, very conservative early in the draft. That's not a concern with Burden. Very capable of being a surprise team. That was one of my last nugget there. Was that this is a team that could shock us. That was something that Sean Payton did often, and they've been fairly hard to predict over the course of their tenure there together in Denver too. So I could definitely see Luther Burden being a pick. He is one of the names I wrote down for him was Brandon Cooks. Sean Payton took Brandon Cooks. He picked it up for Brandon Cooks all those years. I do think Tetairoa McMillan makes sense. Cortland Sutton is going into a contract year.
Yeah.
That's actually a comp that I had for McMillan is Cortland Sutton. Marion Hampton, I think, does make some sense.
No, Marion Hampton makes sense to me. Yeah.
He could be like that.
The other person who I thought of this 20 is too high, but maybe if they move down or if they're moving up in the second round, sounds a lot like an Elijah Arroyo team.
Oh yeah, I mean, like
athletic upside, small sample size.
No question. Yeah. I mean, I think he screams Denver Broncos, and that's what it's like. Everyone's like, oh yeah, they're Colston Loveland, put him in, and I'm like, all right, well, they might just say like, oh, if we can get Arroyo in round 2, like we can let's get a pass rusher or a safety or whoever here in round 1. All right, I like that. That's a good fit.
Okay, let's go Pittsburgh
Steelers.
They have traditionally been a team where everybody sort of knows who they're going to pick ahead of time.
That's right.
So how's that looking this year?
They're all over the board. People, what the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to do.
Good for them for once.
Right. Well, I love this. I love kind of following the Steelers because Mike Tomlin you can tell like just loves the draft process. He doesn't love like the media, all the hype around the draft.
Yeah.
He loves like always at the Senior Bowl, like right on top of drills. He's at the combine. He
kind of loves to coach, man. He loves ball.
Just say he's a ball knower. Now, who are the names most often? Jackson Dart and Emeka Egbuka are the 2 leaders in the clubhouse there. The wide receiver from Ohio State.
Jackson Dart at 21. What are we doing? They just did the Kenny Pickett thing at 19 or whatever. You can't do that again.
Jalen Milroe accepted a draft invite going to the draft in Green Bay. Could this be a spot. I don't know.
But they make a point of they want guys on day 2. Isn't that a thing? Like they want guys who are going to be there for the second round.
Yeah, they haven't announced that the full list yet.
Okay.
So I'm interested to see like what the dispersion is there in terms of
And remember, Jalen Hurts said that he thought that Pittsburgh was going to draft him.
Yeah.
Interesting.
All right, so Dart and the defensive tackles are the most popular options. They have not been mocked a receiver since the.
They are not drafting Jackson Dart at 21.
I agree with you. We're just going off what the mocks are telling us here.
I think it's more likely that you're right that they would draft Jalen Milroe at 21 than Jackson Dart. Come on.
I might be right with that.
I mean, they just did this with Pickett.
No, I'm with you. That said, the other thing to keep in mind, Pittsburgh, like Mike Tomlin's been there for forever. But remember that Omar Khan has only been the GM for the last 2 years. So it's a pretty small sample of what we're looking at here in terms of his history. Very sneakily, they are now one of the, they draft like the traitiest players, a ton of plus athletes, a ton of big, like big prospects. So like a lot of height, weight, speed. Production does not matter. A lot of red production score. Red means negative production scores. Guys that feel like Steelers, I think they still kind of feel that there's that ethos there. Like I think those guys still kind of fit, which is fun though, because now it's like, all right, like you have the type. It's like, as long as you check the boxes from a trait standpoint,
right,
these are guys that kind of fit. With that in mind, Shamar Stewart, I think makes some sense. Matthew Golden, the wide receiver from Texas, the guy they've done a lot of work on. That's the other thing too.
You think Shamar Stewart feels like a Mike Tomlin guy?
I do think that there's something there in terms of like the traits and the fact like
I can get the most out of him
from these markers. Yeah, I do. Now, are they going to select an edge rusher? They've got 3 guys that are.
Yeah.
I don't think that they're. But in terms of guys that fit the profile, Shamar Stewart does. Now, people are calling Shedeur Sanders like the.
We didn't talk about him
here. I know people are calling this. Now, here's the only thing. I mentioned how much Mike Tomlin loves the pre-draft process.
Yeah.
I did not mention the fact that he goes to more pro days than like any head coach in the league, and has done it for years. And that was actually like a telltale sign, more so than the 30 visits was. Did Mike Tomlin and the GM go to the pro day? Because they would always be like, all right, head coach and GM, hand in hand, walking into the pro day, and they would bring the coordinators with them. It's like a traveling roadshow. They go from school to school all through that 2 to 3 week span. Shedeur Sanders had that showcase last week. Separate from everything. They didn't send their head coach. They didn't send the GM. They didn't send the offensive coordinator. They didn't send the quarterback coach. That's good intel. Like, to me, for a team that typically is very like purposeful with sending guys out, the fact that they did not, that to me like speaks.
That's
volumes.
interesting.
Yeah.
Ooh, that's a good nugget.
Yeah. So I do not think this. I won't be mocking them, Shedeur Sanders.
You don't really have anybody in the first 20 taking Shedeur as a neat fit.
Right, as a clean fit. I agree.
Okay,
that's why it's gonna be like, it's good. That's gonna be fascinating.
Okay, L.A. Chargers. You got the Harbaugh. You got the Ravens DNA. What do we think about them in year 2 of this regime with Joe Ortiz?
One big thing that stood out from last year: 78% of their picks, which I think was that 7 of 8, whatever.
Okay.
It was, were guys that they coached in college, and that's not.
You can't do that forever, but you have like a 1 or 2 year opportunity to do that.
Basically, Ortiz said it after. He said, "This is going to be an advantage for us for a couple of years. They know the ins and outs of the players they've coached, that they faced, they've recruited. There was more last year than there are this year in terms of the players. It'll be even less so next year. But that said, when I look at that also, like what's the profile there of the player? Tough, consistent players with long resumes, guys that had like a lot of pelts on the wall, that just like it felt good about what the player was. No bad athletes as well. So with that in mind, who are guys that fit? Colston Loveland, most often mock player to the Chargers. Played for Harbaugh, makes sense. A couple other Michigan guys in there. Kenneth Johnson makes some sense. They've got other coaches on staff that coached Malachi Starks, the safety from Georgia, would make a lot of sense in that defense. Landon Jackson, the pass rusher from Arkansas. This could be like maybe if they trade down or if they go off the board a little bit there. And then Azareye'h Thomas, the corner from Florida State. They just hired their defensive coordinator to be their DB coach this offseason. I think that Azareye'h Thomas is another player I would keep an eye on there.
That's interesting. Some good nuggets.
Yeah, we'll see.
I think they could also be a wide receiver team.
I think so. And when at it, who is the one that it's like, okay, like not a bad athlete, but just tough, consistent, like Egbuka feels that way. Like, that feels like an Egbuka team.
I agree with that. All right, let's go to Green Bay. where it has been difficult for them to focus on the pre-draft process, given the volume of whining and crying from Mark Murphy next to the draft room. Like they sort of have to like turn up the white noise machine because.
Well,
And then he's just like stinking up the house or stinking up the facility with his diapers.
well, from what I understand, it was actually really easy for them to set the board right when the season ended, because when guys came in like after the combine, oh, we got to push this guy off the board. Mark Murphy said, no, we can't push anybody.
Right. Yeah, there's no moving around.
Yeah, no,
they got to
not.
stick with the original board that they had. What is a Green Bay Packers type of player?
Very strict body type thresholds. They've evolved a little bit over time. Justice Mosqueda, who does great work covering the Packers, he's really chronicled this really, really well. But when you talk height, weight, speed, like arm length, all that stuff, they have very strict guidelines on guys that they're trying to bring in the building there. They do trend older across the board. One of the only teams in the league that has taken a 24-year-old in the first round of the current general managers, the current makers. They've only taken 3 FCS players and 72 picks under Brian Gutekunst. I actually asked Goody about this.
Yeah, baby.
This year, and what is it that set those guys apart? And he said, look, they came from FCS programs with great pedigree, and guys that played in all-star games. So that sounds like Gray Zabel.
Okay.
So I'm like, all right, like you can leave Zabel there if you feel like they might go offensive line. That said, I think Shamar Stewart makes a lot of sense. He checks a lot of the boxes for them. Derek Harmon from Oregon makes a lot of sense. Siobhan Revel, the corner from ECU.
Yeah,
makes
I see
a lot
all
of
of those.
Jade Barron as well makes a lot of sense. So to me, there's a few different players I think that make sense.
I think you outlined those guys well. They sound like Packers to me. How about in Minnesota, Adolfo Mensa? What has been his type?
So I was very interested to talk to Kwesi at the combine for this reason, because he got hired. Everyone kind of he came from Cleveland. He's known as like for the analytic background. It's going to follow the same template with the Cleveland Browns. It's going to be young, athletic, Power 5, like traitsy players. Like we're going to keep it on the fairway from an analytic standpoint. They have been the opposite.
Yeah,
it's like unlike Cleveland. This is just for my notes. Taken one of the lowest numbers of 21 and 22-year-old players. They've taken a lot of older guys, a high amount of red flag players, guys that had like some baggage character-wise or medical-wise, more bad athletes than I would have expected. So I asked Kwesi about this at the combine, and he gave I thought a great answer. I had not thought about it this way. He said, I think with everything, we try and not be hard set in our rules per se. And I think obviously you always want the players that are most at everything, the youngest, the fastest, the biggest, the smartest. There's only so many of those players in every draft. So what do you do after that? How do you win on the margins? How do you find value elsewhere? We play a lot of great systems that tax other parts of a player besides pure athleticism. And so we try and get value out of that. But look, I think if you look at our draft, our free agency acquisitions, it's a portfolio. You're trying to find different bets in different ways. We have a 2 or 3 year horizon where we're trying to do those things and ultimately go see where it shakes out relative to your benchmark and then go from there. That was an awesome answer. And also just a way that, again, all this stuff that we're talking about can be important, but you got to kind of
just because you have a preference doesn't mean it's a possibility to get that preference, right?
Yeah.
And just because you have a preference doesn't mean you're going to opt for the preference over a higher graded player who has a couple dings on the things that you prefer.
Exactly right. And so when I look at it there, when I have a team like this and I'm going to do a mock draft, there's obviously a lot of ambiguity because all doors are open in my mind when I'm looking at Arizona. Oh, this guy's really small. I don't think they're going to look down on that. Oh, this guy came from a small school. They're not going to look down on that. He tests well. He didn't produce, whatever it is. Then it comes down to like scheme fit.
Yeah.
And so for me, when I look at Minnesota, that is something I'm certainly trying to do to keep looking at. One of the higher 30 visit trends in the league as well, so that they can be a little bit predictive from that standpoint. So here are a few names I've got written down for Minnesota, and it goes really on both sides of the ball. But I think this is going to be a defensive pick if I had to guess here. Nick Emanwari was in my first mock draft to Brian Flores. I think he ton of sense for a Brian Flores defense. Derek Harmon, often mocked there, defensive tackle from Oregon. It feels like Harmon's going to go in the first round. I keep bringing him up here. Siobhan Revel, the corner from ECU, I think makes a lot of sense.
Purple to purple.
Yeah, the jersey combo makes some sense there. Will Johnson, the corner from Michigan, makes some sense. Maxwell Hairston, the corner from Kentucky, and then Malachi Starks from. So, yeah, I think that when you're looking at Minnesota, this is a team that it feels defense. I think a lot of options are open for this team.
One other one.
Okay.
I think they might be a sneaky running back team.
Okay.
What about Omarion Hampton?
I could see that.
right?
If Hampton made it this far,
If Hampton makes it this far, he's glaring at the top of their board.
Yep.
They don't stick to the analytical no running back in the first round, and you're thinking of how can we help out JJ McCarthy? I think I could see that.
I could see that. They've talked about like the running back.
I mean, they've
kind of
got Aaron
preserving
Jones.
Jones.
Yeah,
Yeah, and they've said it like, oh, we want him to be the best version of himself. Yeah, I like that.
All right, let's move on to Houston.
All right, we're at 110.
We're at 110.
We've got 8 teams left.
Yeah,
We're
Houston, Texas. Nick Caserio. They have sort of tried to rebuild this roster on the fly over the past couple months. What do you think they might be focused on doing?
Almost every single one of their picks since he's been hired has been Power 5. I think it's just one player has not been Power 5. Now, Gray Zabel has been a locked player to them. Could that eliminate Zabel? Maybe, maybe not. Like we don't know. But that's one to keep in mind. One of the highest numbers of third-year players in the first 2 days of the draft. Their first 2 picks is Nick Caserio. Remember, they didn't have a first-round pick. They didn't have a second-round pick. His first draft there. So his first 2 picks were in the 3rd round. They took Davis Mills and they took Nico Collins. They were both 4th-year guys that didn't produce and like they didn't have long resume in college. Their next 12 selections from 2022 to 2024, again in the first 3 rounds of the draft, they were all 3rd-year guys. Interesting. So I don't know if that's Gray Zabel. I don't know if this is a Mecca who is more like that long track record type. I think it's probably more the 3rd-year guy that you're kind of betting on upside. They have not drafted one character red flag under Nick Caserio. Could that eliminate Josh Simmons, depending on their evaluation of the background? Yeah, I think that this one is an interesting pick here. Again, all 4, this is another one too. All 4 of their first-round picks under Nick Caserio and 4 out of his 10 day 2 picks have all been in for 30 visits. So they can be predictive that way. So in for a 30 visit, young player, like 3rd-year junior, from a Power 5 school. Nice little profile. Nice little profile. Who fits that?
I don't know who's visited them, but that sounds Kelvin Banks.
They have been very quiet with the 30 this year.
Okay.
So we'll see.
Well, they have been quiet, but what that also means is they don't have as many beat writers covering the team.
Right. So
right?
the
so
one,
you're going to get less reporting about visits.
That's very true. One guy who is typically on top of like visits and is like one of my go-to is Aaron Wilson.
Yeah, that's true.
Covers that team pretty closely. He's had like private workouts with them. Not a lot. Okay. I think he has put out like 5 or 6 30 visits so far.
Okay.
So not a huge.
They got to go offensive line though.
I would think so. Yes. So I think Kelvin Banks Jr. definitely fit. That's the other thing too is that like D'Amico. Like they have very quickly like flipped that culture to the point where you can like watch a guy and say like, yep, he's a fit for the Houston Texans, or this guy's not a fit. I think Kelvin Banks kind of represents the idea of what they want to be.
What, just the nastiness,
but also just like the buttoned upness. Is that the?
Of course, yeah,
sure. That's a word, right?
The buttoned upness.
The buttoned upness. I think
your shirt.
Right. Exactly. I'm missing the top one. But yeah, Kelvin Banks Jr. I think makes some sense. I think Matthew Golden, the receiver from Texas, I think he would make some sense. I put Shamar Stewart in there because of the profile. I don't think that they would take an edge rusher this guy just because of what they've got tied up in position. I do think Tyler Booker makes a ton of sense here for this team, the guard from Alabama.
My pushback on Tyler Booker is I feel like it's a not dissimilar profile to Kenyon Green, and they just had that bust.
Yeah, but the thing with
guard only.
Yeah, but Green played 4 out of 5 positions in college, and also like Booker is like A+++ off the field, like extremely locked in. He was a team captain as a junior at Alabama. Like they like loved him off the field. So not to like speak badly on Kenyon Green, but you get what I'm saying. Luther Burden would be the other one that's interesting because I think receiver is a sneaky need for this team. And if Burden kind of if they're okay with the presumed like off field stuff there with Burden, then that would be another one to watch out for.
All right, let's go to the Rams. Who are the oldest players in the draft?
Right. What's fascinating about this one, if you looked at that mock draft I did a couple weeks ago, Josh Connerly was the one that was most often mocked to them. He was at 9, and the next one after that was like 2 or 3. All of the Josh Connerly picks were before the combine. So it was like every mock draft before the combine gave them Josh Connerly, and none since then.
What does that mean? Those people think he's going to go earlier?
It's later. Yeah, I think everyone presumed Josh Connerly would go first round, and then they got around scouts for a little week, and they were like, oh yeah, actually, never mind. So I think he's more of a day 2 guy.
Now, the Rams don't have a second-round pick, so this is a team, like if you're thinking of Howie Roseman moving up from 32, this is the spot where that could make sense.
I agree. I think the Rams absolutely would be a team they're typically looking to trade down. They could be aggressive trade up team as well. They were very active trying to move up last year. People are all over the board. No one has been picked twice in the last 2 weeks for this team.
Okay.
So
Well, yeah,
no
the
one
further
really
you
knows
get down, yeah.
yeah, but usually there's like, there's some like trends. The people are all over the board with this franchise right now. So now what makes it especially tough is Rams are very mysterious. Like they abstain from the Senior Bowl. They don't go to the Senior Bowl. They don't go to the Senior Bowl. They don't send many people at all to the combine. So it's there's not a lot of intel out there about the Rams. So they also haven't had a lot of first round picks, obviously, in recent years. So there's not a lot of trends to go off of with this team. So some of the highest rates of poor athleticism and speed scores.
It's crazy. They take guys with like terrible profiles,
yes,
and they work out very well.
So, usually work out pretty well. They trend more towards old players, like you mentioned, experienced seniors. It's also like, listening to like the press conferences with Snead, with McVay after the draft. It's very much like a vibes team. It's like,
yeah,
we love the journey, really clutch.
Well, I remember asking Jordan about the old guys. Like, you know what? I kind of think that like Sean McVay just doesn't have the patience for young guys anymore.
I think that might be right.
He just wants.
Well, that's what they're perceived as. They're not this way, but they're perceived as a team that's like very like analytically forward and stuff.
Yeah,
but a lot of the things they talk about are like not
right.
Again, it's like, oh, this guy's just really clutch, or like, oh, he comes from a football family, or the guy's care factor. And interviews matter in a big way for this team. They are very quiet about it. Again, they usually don't send people out to events. Les Snead did go to a couple of pro days this year, which is a little bit different for him. I wonder if that's because Gladstone's not there. That might be the case. So yeah, this is
Can I throw one other wild card at you?
Yeah,
Shedeur.
I know. I've thought about it, and I do think that it's possible. I think Shedeur, that's a sneaky Shedeur team.
Okay. Right?
Yeah, I do think it's a sneaky Shedeur team. I do think it's going to be offense. I don't think last year the plan was for it to be an offensive draft. It ended up being defense heavy. I think that this year it's like almost definitely going to be offense. I think Emeka Egbuka is like I could see them thinking he's a Cooper Kupp replacement. Well, like his strengths and like I'm not saying he's Cooper Kupp, but I could see them squinting if it could be Cooper Kupp. I think that Luther Burden, like yards after catch wise, makes a lot of sense. I made the Brandon Cooks comparison before. Like he's a guy that has had success in that McVay scheme. I think Grace Abel would make some sense. Jade Barron is another one I think would make some sense for the team. So yeah, that's going to be an interesting one when they're on the clock.
That's an interesting one. All right, let's go to Baltimore, another team that you have a nice long history of preferences. What do you know about okay, well, tell me why.
Because you had Ozzy for obviously the longest time. And DeCosta, he's been over a few years.
Similar DNA though, yeah.
Similar DNA, but they've pivoted on a few different things.
Okay.
We used to make obviously still week or last week the Hayden Hurst pick.
Yeah, true.
I mean that was one of Ozzie Newsome's last picks.
Yeah.
Since then they are like they trend very very young early on in the draft. They're not taking 25-year-old tight ends in the round.
Thank God,
not yet. I guess it's time will tell. Maybe they think
Joshua Simon.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, look, right now, Malachi Starks most often mocked to them. Josh Simmons mocked to them. Nick Moore, Jade Barron. It does feel like this is the floor of Malachi Starks in most mock drafts. They are not afraid of guys that don't test well. I remember after the Kyle Hamilton pick in 2022, one of the notes I wrote from DeCosta was, I can tell you what some of our best players the last few years ran in the like they like a running joke in that building. That guys fall to them. Zero character red flags under Eric DeCosta. They've been more of a mystery team under DeCosta. Good smokescreen team. With they use their local writers pretty well. Where it's like, a lot of their local writers go with this player, and then they pivot and they go somewhere different. He has talked in interviews about how they were really purposeful about sure that Lamar Jackson's didn't get out because they didn't want anyone to know that they were kind of potentially interested in him. How they will use that way as smokescreens. So. Players that I've got for them, I do think Malachi Starks makes sense. If he were to fall, he feels like that kind of player. A couple of these edge rushers, Michael Williams, if he were to somehow fall because he didn't test all that great. Nick Scorton, the earliest he would go. Donovan Ezeraku definitely feels like a Ravens type of pick. And then Tetairoa McMillan, I think makes sense. Tyler Booker makes sense. So
I could also see them double dipping at corner.
Wiggins last year, I could see that too. Yeah, they moved on from a couple guys in that group.
Chidobe Awuzie is.
There's probably not counting on him.
Right. Well, you've got Jade Barron in here as a possibility, but I could see that.
I could see that too.
All right, Detroit. Who's going to bite some kneecaps? Who's going to eat through some glass for Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell?
Most often mocked player to them in all the mock draft samples I pulled, it's like 40 plus mock drafts, is Mike Green, pass rusher from Marshall.
Yeah.
Not once since the Senior Bowl.
Okay.
So,
All right, well,
I think that when you're looking at it, and I think that makes some sense there. Donovan Jackson, right after that, the guard from Ohio State. Shamar Stewart, the defensive end from Texas A&M, and then a handful of players. Now, heavy offensive line, defensive line. That's where most people feel like the Lions are going to go. Now it's just they're all over the board in terms of who that player is. Here's the profile for the Lions under this regime. Very young. 50% of their picks were 21 years old or younger on days 1 and 2. 86%, 22 years old or younger. That's some of the highest rates of third-year guys early in the draft. So typically going to trend younger. Versatility on both sides of the ball. Guys that you mentioned the bite the kneecaps. So yeah, like there's a certain kind of player that they're looking for. Position value, we know, not important for them. They went Jahmyr Gibbs and the linebacker from Iowa, Jack Campbell, and they like laughed at the idea of positional value in the months and years after that. So players over projects, more finished products. So there's something else that Brad Holmes was asked about last year. They've taken guys from high in the draft from like Alabama, Iowa, like blue blood, like pro style programs. And he said, yeah, it's probably more of a coincidence, but you do have a good feel for players from those schools. You know what they've been through. You know how they practice. You know the kind of coaching they've gotten. So that's kind of earmarked as well. Some guys I think make a lot of sense. Donovan Ezraku, I think makes a lot of sense for the Detroit Lions. Derek Harmon, defensive tackle from Oregon, makes a lot of sense. Jihad Campbell from Alabama. Tyler Booker, the guard from Alabama as well. I think make a lot of sense for the Lions.
All right. Washington, year 2 of this regime.
Yep.
Trying to bounce back from the NFC Championship. Now they traded a future second-round pick for Laramie Tunsil, so maybe they're a team who wants to move down a little bit. But what do you think? What do you think we'll see from them?
Yeah, a lot of people have them going with Chris Jr. or Mike Green. Those are the two most commonly mocked players to this franchise. I actually don't think either make a lot of sense.
Neither do I.
Yeah, I don't think either. I think James Pierce, like potentially, like on field, would make some sense there. But I think that when you're looking at the way that they pick players, I think there are other guys. So,
I also think it's all the behind the scenes videos from Washington last year was about like the guys who were going to help set their culture.
1,000%.
And I think that changes in year 2. I think you still want that. You're still building the bedrock, but I think you're a little bit more willing to focus on specific needs and stuff.
That was my question for Adam Peters Combine was about this because they drafted like
unbelievable. We didn't even plan that.
Well, like 6. They drafted like 6 captains last year.
Yeah.
It was like something like that, and that was a big emphasis.
Yeah.
Now that was my question I was going to ask. Someone jumped me and asked the same exact question. So I actually went up to the guy after. I was like,
nice.
I had the same exact question, like ready to roll. And Adam Peters gave an answer I wanted to hear. Was like he was on one side. He was like, honestly, when we had our exit meetings, a lot of the vets told us that they loved the type of player that we bought in. Because the way I wanted to frame the question was, do you double down? You drafted this way last year. Do you double down on that and say, keep going? Or is it, how tempting is it to say, hey, you know what, like maybe we
got
can
these
skip
guys
there. Like now we can go and we can take a bigger risk. And he said, no, like we had those exit meetings. So adamant that they liked the type of player that we went in. So double down on it. So I think that if there are questions there about guys off the field, I don't. So
Tyler Booker.
Yeah, Tyler Booker makes a lot of sense. It's the Sam Cosmi tears the ACL in December or January. I think that would be a guy that certainly fits that ethos. Donovan Ezraku, I think, makes a lot of sense there. Skill set wise, he's the kind of player that I think that Dan Quinn could work with there in that defense. Jihad Campbell, the linebacker from Washington. How often did we see Washington blitz those linebackers? I think he would fit really well in the team. And then Grace Abel, I think, makes some sense as well in that offense. Especially one of the big things from Adam Peters. This was the way with him in San Francisco. It was the way with him in Denver as well. And certainly showed up in Washington last year. A lot of Senior Bowl players, especially early on in the draft, contextually compared to other teams. So that would be something to watch as well. All right,
move us on a little bit quickly to go to Buffalo at number 30. Buffalo, a team that has an extra second-round pick, so they could be willing to move up in a little bit. But what do you know of the Brandon Bean type?
Yeah,
shout out to Shea.
Aggressive to trade up. Yeah, the Bean. Aggressive to trade up. Age matters early. 4 out of 6 first rounders are 21 years old or younger. Athletic profile matters for round one. Does not matter later in the draft, but the early picks, the first round picks, athletic profile matters. Production matters early on, so you can remove like a guy like Mark Stewart in my mind from this conversation if he were to fall here. Alert for the Senior Bowl, even early on. Positional value does not matter. So 3 names that I've got penciled in for Buffalo, knowing all these factors. Nick Emanwari, the safety from South Carolina. Landon Jackson, the pass rusher from Arkansas. And Maxwell Hairston, the corner from Kentucky.
Okay, let's go to Kansas City. Andy Reid, Brett Veach. Used to picking at the back end of the first round. What do we know about him?
Heavy love for Josh Simmons in recent mock drafts.
Yeah.
It feels like everyone's kind of penciling him into that spot. A lot of it has happened in the last couple weeks. So that's where a lot of the love is going right now. Almost half of their early round picks have been true juniors. So he's a redshirt junior, so he would be just off that. But they've gone younger, not afraid of size limitations in all areas of the draft. They've trended a lot smaller. A lot of people think like, oh, it's Andy Reid. It's a lot of speed, a lot of high athletic players. They've actually look, they're not going to turn down guys with speed. They traded up for Xavier Worthy last year, but it's not like, oh yeah, they only draft guys with high athletic profiles. Compared to the rest of the league, it's actually a below average number. But the big thing that stands out, really versatile players, guys that can be moved all around the formation, used in a lot of different ways on both sides of the football. So, and we also know that they're willing to make they'll make concessions off the field as well. So
it's almost like they want it.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's like they feel like that's value that they can get. So that's where like, anyone that has those questions, you can say like, okay, this could be a safe landing spot. So James Pierce and Mike Green and those guys, right? So and obviously all these cases are different. Walter Nolan, Azaria Thomas is a scheme fit that I think makes a lot of sense. Everyone talks about like, hey, like they couldn't protect. Yeah, they couldn't protect the Eagles in the Super Bowl. They also couldn't stop AJ Brown and Devontae Smith. Like the Eagles receivers had their way with those corners. They like big, long, physical press corners in that scheme. Azaria Thomas kind of he fits that bill. So I've mocked him there. I do think that makes some sense. Emanwari makes some sense. Well, Tyler Booker would make sense, but those are the names there for the Chiefs.
All right. If you are an Eagles fan,
waited this long.
You have waited this long. Fran has been pouring out everything from his brain. Before we get to Howie Roseman, how about you do us a favor? How about you like the video? How about you comment below? Tell us who you think the Eagles want to take at 32. Subscribe to the channel. All that good stuff. Become a diehard. See Fran's diehard draft guide. All that good stuff. Okay. Howie Roseman.
All over the place.
All over the place. I think recently we know the top 30 visits matter a lot.
Yep, agree.
They want to make the best bet they can.
Yep.
And worry a little bit less about obfuscation and more about, making sure that they're bringing the right guys in the building. I think the football character matters a lot to them in recent vintage. Anything else in terms of athletically or otherwise that is worth keeping in the back of our minds?
Yeah, I think that certainly, and I think that the profile shows up a little bit more for day 3 than it does for round 1. But I'm looking for like, they use the word unusual, like guys that have those unique traits. I think that certainly comes up, and outside of that, it's like that toughness, that physicality, that edge, that dog mentality. Right, a lot of the guys they've taken since Sirianni has gotten hired as the head coach have kind of fit that same profile. So I think that's you're certainly looking there. We've talked about players from title teams, teams that's a lot of success. That's a prevalent theme that has popped up. Talked about character matters, like. If they took Mike Green at 32 after the interview that Howie did at the combine with Todd McShay, like I don't think that wouldn't add up, right? Like, you wouldn't be able to do that. So I just that there are certain things that they're not going to cross that bridge early in the draft. You're doing this mock draft. 30 visits can be predictive, like you mentioned. To me, this goes back to some of the other conversations we've had with some of these other general managers that have been entrenched for so long. Is that their profiles are going to evolve, and you have to take into account fit, coaching fit. Like the coaches are extremely involved in Philadelphia with the pre-draft process. And so I think you have to take all that into account.
Malachi Stark's a reasonable.
Definitely.
I mean, he might not even be there.
Might not be there
at 32, but does he strike you as a Howie guy and a Vic Fangio guy?
Definitely. I think he checks both boxes. You're talking about like from a profile standpoint, like from the Howie end of it. I think you're talking about. Look, he didn't test great, but like a young, productive leader, high character, everything there you feel good about. And then schematically with Vic Fangio, checks all the boxes.
Did Tyler Booker strike you as a stout guy?
Yes. Looking at like powerful people mover guards. Now, the one knock I would say for Tyler Booker is that he has been a guard only.
Yeah.
So that would be the knock in terms of the profile. But I think that he fit like if you feel great that he is going to step in and be that guy, then you are less worried about it. I mean, look, I'm digging into this a little bit, but like Chance Warmack, you know, it was a guy that played for Stout at Alabama, but also like ended up playing for Stout here in Philly as well. Was a guard only, but he was seen as an elite prospect. And Booker, I think, you know, would fit that bill.
I'm going to go give you a couple extra guys who have done the 30 visit. You tell me if they check those boxes. Josh Connerly Jr., who you said before, has been dropping out of the first round in some mocks, but we're talking 32 here.
Right. I think that athletically he does make sense. I mean, when I first watched him, and I'm not super high on Connerly, but when I first watched him, I compared him to Jack Driscoll. Like, you know, a guy that obviously was drafted here with the Eagles. So I think when you're looking at Connerly, like I think he could make some sense.
Nick Scorton?
Yeah, I do, because I think when you're looking at his ability to play the run, I think he checks the box there. This is a guy that wins with power, wins with force and strength. He can win off the top of the rush. He's a young player that's had peaks of production. So yeah, I think he would make some sense for both sides.
Last one, Donovan Ezeraku.
I think Ezeraku does make some sense. We talked yesterday on the show, on the PHLY Eagles show, about some of my reservations with Ezeraku. But I think when you get to 32, you be able to look past some of that in terms of, like, is he a top-end athlete for his size? He's a really skilled rusher. Do I want him and Nolan Smith on the field at the same time? There's probably some sameness there that I don't feel great about. But yeah, I think he would make some sense.
All right.
Walter Nolan certainly makes sense.
Yes, but they just haven't brought him in yet.
Correct.
Good point. There you go.
131.
I'm not bad.
That's pretty good.
Julia may not feel the same way, but
I'm sorry, Julia.
That's okay. All right, good stuff on the PHLY Draft Show with Fran Duffy. That'll do it for this week's episode. We will be back next week. Maybe next week is when we do the double dip episode. We do it Tuesday, Thursday. We'll talk about it. We'll get that planned. We're going to do one episode pre-draft where we're just banging out your questions in the chat. Not a mailbag, a chat bag. Distinction. But thank you to Fran for doing all of that work, giving us a nice episode, and we'll see how it all plays out come 16 days from now in the first round of the NFL Draft. That'll do it for this episode. Thanks for watching. We will talk to you next time on the PHLY Draft Show with Fran Duffy.
We all silly like the mayor.